Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and a little bit of design too. In today's video, we're going to dive into how to create characters from everyday life objects. So with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. And so the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to try and understand the structure of these basic elements. Now, if you're a little bit more advanced or intermediate in your illustration journey, you might want to skip this step. But if you're a beginner, this is such a helpful tip to always keep in mind whenever you want to draw something new. And what that is we don't want to trace, but we can always just try to understand the basic shapes by drawing over the image and then redrawing from scratch. So here I have my references on one layer, and what I did is I put them in black and white right here. I just used the hue saturation brightness tool and reduced the saturation to 0, just so that I can draw my lines in a super bright color and see them very well. And then I went ahead and just created a layer above my references so that I can draw and then hide my references and only have the structural lines. So here we're going to start with just the cola here, super simple. We essentially have 2 vertical lines, and then I'm going to simplify it, 1 oval at the top and kind of 1 oval at the bottom. So it's a cylinder essentially. If I was to draw here, you can see, you get the point. And then at the bottom we don't see the whole oval, but if the can was clear we would. So we only see this half here, but they would be the other half here in the back. So soda can is super simple. Now the milk carton is very similar. Instead of being a cylinder, so a circle for the base, it is more of a box. So we have a square for the base. Now the image is a little bit skewed, so it looks not quite square, but if you've seen a milk carton this size, you know what it is. So what we can do here is, again, just kind of draw what our base would be. We don't see these 2 back sides, but we know that they're there. We also know that the box goes up, so we would have these edges. The box would be closed at the top, of course, and then we wouldn't see this section. Now what makes it a milk carton is this fun shape at the top, so we just have this diagonal here to create kind of the triangle, and then the section where both pieces of the cardboard connect together and create this little lip at the top. So once we do have this, it looks absolutely crazy, but if we go ahead and we hide our reference layer, we can see we have some very strong structural lines that are going to help us create a character that is not going to be traced or copied. Now I'm realizing here I'm missing essentially this little diagonal line, so I'm just going to add it real quick, but yeah, we have the main key lines that we need in our illustration, so then we can use those and customize those. And having those lines, those basic structure lines, is also going to help us add more personality to our characters, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so for now we're just going to start by creating the actual sketch. I'm personally going to move forward with the soda can, but seriously, again, you can just follow these basic steps to identify the basic structure lines in any image of your choice, or if you're an intermediate, just use whatever strategy you have to create a base shape. Now, if you want to bring your characters to the next level, if you want to dive a little bit deeper in what we've been talking about, I highly recommend you check out the video description, because there you will find a link for my freebies bundle, which now includes a PDF on how to use movement lines, which are also sometimes called line of action, depending on what I'm talking about. So how you can use those to really bring your characters to life even more and just give them a lot more personalities. So make sure to check the video description to grab your PDF, and again, it comes with a bunch of other freebies like brushes, color palette, templates, and cheat sheets. Great, so now that we understand our basic structural shapes, which I should bring them back, there we go, we're going to go ahead and sketch the character. So we're going to give more personality to these lines and just all around make it way more fun. So go ahead and create a new layer and rename that new layer, to sketch. Now I like to sketch with a neutral gray, but here you could really use whatever color you want. We're not going to see the sketch in the final illustration anyway, so it doesn't matter at all. Now in this video, I'm going to be using brushes from my inking, stippling, and texture bundle. That being said, they are not essential at all. I'm going to give you tips on finding other brushes that are that would work and that are either within Procreate, within the free bundles that come with the app, or if you are working with a different software, brushes that you would be able to find in that software. Now, if you do want to check out my bundle, it will be linked in the description below, and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people. Now for the sketch again though, we're not going to see it in the final result, so the brush you use doesn't matter as long as you're comfortable with it. That's really all that's important. I am personally going to use the bonus sketching brush from the inking pack that comes within that bundle. So here I'm just going to start with roughly deciding what I want my character to be doing. I already have the sketch and I ran it through Instagram as I told you, and so my soda can is actually just walking kind of casually down the sidewalk and sipping on a soda can. Why not? So I'm gonna have kind of a fun angle like this. It's kind of leaning back a little bit, and so my whole shape here is going to be at that angle. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of draw this side of my can here, so just these lines that were vertical, and take the same ovals, oops, but this time place them on the angle as well. Now if I bring back my reference here, we can see there's a little bit of it kind of narrows at the top of the soda can, so maybe I could add that to my illustration as well. Just making sure I'm back on my sketch layer. And all we have to do is add, these little diagonal line, and then the oval at the top becomes smaller. So you just reduce it, but it's still super simple oval. And at the bottom here, there's this little lip. So maybe I can add that too. It's a curve that is going to match the one of my oval here, but we have little diagonal lines too. So you can see already it's looking like a soda can, and it's just this messy sketch, but this is really all we need for now. I'm going to start adding some just fun characteristic to make this a character. So we're going to start with the face. I'm going to put my face on this side here. Again, you could customize it. So I'm just going to sketch the two ovals. But one thing that we need to look at here is make sure that those ovals are still in line with the general tilt of our piece. So if we were to draw, a can that was straight, and we were to put the eyes on the can that was straight, we would have them be, horizontal, or at least align them horizontally. And then we would have this kind of 90 degrees here. So we need to make sure we have that same 90 degrees. We have our angle here. So you can go ahead and draw a little horizontal line if you're struggling, making sure it's 90 degrees with our tilt. And then you're going to be able to place your eyes maybe a little bit more easily. Now I want my eyes to be looking forward, so I'm going to draw 2 more ovals in my ovals like this. And for now I'm just going to quickly fill those in with a bit of gray. Great. Next thing I'm going to draw is the nose and the mouth. Now the nose, I'm going to keep it kind of bubbly and round because I'm going to have some patterns on my soda can that are bubbly and round. So it's just a way of tying it all together. I'm going to have this nose right here. Actually, maybe a little bit wider. Yeah, like this. And then we're going to draw the mouth, which is just such a key element because again, the soda can here is sipping on a soda. So if you were drawing pretty much anything else than this, you would probably draw this kind of fun smile here that is quite retro with 1 or 2 cheeks. You could also draw a big open mouth. That could be fun for this style with the tongue kind of like this. So those are all easy options. But if you're drawing this soda can like me, we're going to draw this kind of triangle here with an oval at the front, which is going to be the lips. If I zoom in here, we can add a little hole where the straw is going to go. I think I'm going to start with the legs just to see a little bit better the size of everything. So I'm going to have this one leg that is moving forward that is going to be super straight, kind of like this, and then the foot kind of arching forward. It's really exaggerated. You wouldn't see anyone walk like this. I might just draw the ground here so I know where to place the other foot. The other leg is going to be curved. So like that. And then I'm going to have half of the foot kind of standing up and the other half is going to be on the ground. So we have this combination of two shapes that is going to help us create later a really nice bent foot. From there, we're going to draw the arms. Again, my soda can in my mind is super chill and casual, so I'm going to have this arm that is not holding the can just flopped. And I like for these retro characters to draw a little circle where I want the arms to be. I find that super helpful. And then just draw these kind of slightly curvy, thin noodle arms. For now, we're going to just draw this big rectangle for the hand, but I'm going to show you how to refine the head for at least the soda can later. So the last, or not quite, we have the top as well to draw, but the last thing we have to draw in terms of the limbs is, well, the hand that is holding the soda can. And so here I'm going to have the arm mostly hidden by the soda can, or at least the top of the arm. And then the forearm is kind of coming forward a little bit. And then we're going to have a small soda can. So same shapes as we use for the big one. Our 2 vertical lines and then our 2 ovals. And then a big rectangle for the hand as well. And I'll draw a little straw. So honestly, we could stop here, but I want to add a straw on top of that soda can. I feel like it's just funny to mimic the small one on the big one. But I'm realizing I'm missing some room, so I'm just going to use my arrow tool to move my character down. There we go. Now we don't see it in the reference image, but the little pop lid thingy, I don't know what you would call that. I'm going to draw it, but I'm going to draw first a little hole. And then I'll just go from memory. I guess it's this little kind of rounded rectangle. That'll do. Otherwise, I'm missing the straw. So I want to make sure the straw looks like it could be in the drink. So I'm going to draw one big line that goes down to the bottom to make sure that my angle is not weird. So here I know, okay, it fits within the can. I'm gonna draw the other line. One tip here that you might see me doing is when you're drawing lines in Procreate, if you hold your pencil instead of lifting it, you're going to be able to create a super straight line, and you're also going to be able to move it around. So that's really, really helpful. So just like that. And then we're going to create the bendy part. I'm going to put it roughly here, so I have a little bit of clearance to put the opening of the straw. So that's really the idea. As you can see, it's not much more complicated than when we have our structure lines. We're just adding more elements to it. And those elements are also pretty simple as long as you understand the basic shapes. That being said, once you do have your basic sketch, feel free to change things if you want. I might squish it a little bit, so using the arrow tool here, setting it to distort or warp, and kind of moving stuff around a little bit to change the proportions if you want. I find mine was just too tall, so I'm just making it a little bit shorter. You could also use a selection tool and maybe change specific elements, like maybe this eye to me is a little bit too close to the other, so I can draw a selection around it. And so if I set my selection tool to freehand, I can just draw a selection around the element I want to move, and then with the arrow tool move that element to a better spot. I could also resize it if I wanted to, making sure it's set to uniform when you resize if you don't want to change the proportions. So something like this. And then I might add a bit of a design on the can, so just this kind of wavy swoop that I was telling you about earlier. So it's these simple S-curves here at the top and the bottom. Maybe some circles to evoke bubbles. Yeah, something like that. And maybe I can try to write soda within the swoop. Kind of like the Coca-Cola, or I guess it's more Pepsi that has a swoop. I really don't know my sodas and colas. . so I'm just going to sketch it super quickly. But we're going to refine that when we add the colors. So at this stage, if you have 6 million lines in your sketch, it is totally okay. That's totally normal. We don't expect to have something clean at this stage. We're just kind of trying to figure out what we want to draw. So take all the time you need here to add more elements if you want, to refine the elements until you're happy with the placement and the proportions of them, but not really, again, the cleanliness per se of the sketch. Great. Now, once you do have a sketch that you're happy with, again, just in terms of proportions, sizes, and shapes, not the look of the lines, we're going to move on and actually create clean outlines. And for that, you can go ahead and lower the opacity of your sketch so it's not quite as in the way as it is right now. And if you're working in Procreate, you can do that by tapping on the little N next to the check mark on the layer, and then lowering the opacity right here until you can just barely see it. Now I'm going to keep mine a bit more opaque so you can see it in the video. Then from there, we're going to create a new layer above the sketch, and we are going to rename that new layer to Outlines. Now for now, we're going to pick really whatever color we want for the outlines, something dark that you're going to see well, but we're going to recolor them later, so don't worry too much about it. I'm just going to go with this super dark kind of charcoal gray. And we're going to try to find an inking brush that is smooth and fluid. So if you're working with my inking, stippling, and texture bundle, we're going to pick the Ultra Smooth Tracing, the third brush from the top. If you're working with the free Procreate brushes, there is an inking pack that comes with the app, so free pack. And honestly, all of those could work really well depending on your preferences. I think the Studio Pen is probably my favorite within that list, so this is what I would suggest. If you're working in different software, just try to find something that has really crisp edges. So you don't want to have any texture or any feathering or smooth kind of gradient look within this brush. You want something crisp and clean. So even a basic round brush, just a circle brush, would work at this stage. Now I do like to have this Ultra Smooth Tracing brush because it is quite reactive to the Apple Pencil. We get some thicker and thinner sections depending on how hard you press and how quickly you draw. So it's just going to allow you to have a bit better range of dynamics within your outlines, but again, not essential in the slightest shape or form. So at this stage, what we're going to do, it's quite simple, but it is really a crucial step. We're going to pick out of all the crazy lines we have in the sketch, which one we actually want to have in the final illustration. So it's really pretty much straightforward. We're just going to trace over what we have until we're happy with one line, and we're going to move on to the next section. Now, one thing here, the size you use obviously is going to depend on the size of the canvas you're working with, the brush you're working with, and a lot of different things. So make sure that before you start tracing, you experiment and you see a size that you like. I was lucky, the brush was already a size that I liked, so that's what I'm going to go with. But you want to make sure you have consistent size outlines throughout the whole piece. I'm going to stop talking in a minute, but I'm going to give you a few tips before I do that. When we draw outlines, it is tempting to erase a lot. So let's say I don't like this section, which is not true, I think it's fine. But I might go ahead and erase it and then try to redraw it. Try to avoid doing that. As much as possible, try to avoid erasing when you're drawing your outlines. There's a few reasons for that. One of them being it's going to be quite hard to match the size of your lines, so it's going to look a little bit off. You're also going to get outlines that don't flow as well. They're going to be more choppy, a little bit more rigid, and just overall less aesthetically pleasing, or visually pleasing, I should say. So again, when you're drawing outlines, don't erase, just undo and redraw until you're happy with that section. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my outlines really quickly for this character. I'm going to speed up my video so you can see what I'm doing and use it as a reference if you're drawing the soda can as well. And before we start adding the colors, I'm going to come back and just give you a few outlining tips and tricks to really take your outlines to the next level. Oh, almost forgot, that's a good example actually that I started working on. If you have a leg or a section that is crossing another one, It's not very clear what I'm saying right now. Like this leg is in front of this leg. If you were to draw your outline here and then this one, it is quite possible that the two sections of your element are not going to look connected. There's going to be this disconnect and they might not be well aligned. So what you can do in this case is just create a new temporary layer. Draw the whole line for that whole shape. And then while it's on a separate layer, you can easily come in and erase any overlaps that are undesired or undesirable and merge your layers again. But I'm going to stop talking for real here, so that I will see you back in a few minutes when we have most of the outlines done. Great, so at this stage you can see I have most of my outlines except for a few elements like the hands, because I do want to show you how to draw them, and then I have some other things missing too because I want to give you a little bit more tips and tricks. So one of those things that I'm missing is the other eye, and the reason for that is I want to make sure both eyes are the exact same. I think that's a big part of that style again, is just this super symmetrical eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my eraser here to erase the little triangle that is also a big part of that style. Gonna highlight. There we go. And then once we have the eye the way we want it, we're going to use our selection tool here. We're going to draw a selection around the eye, and we're going to duplicate it to create a copy. Now the way to do that in Procreate is super easy. You take 3 fingers, you swipe down, and you select duplicate right here in the menu. And then automatically going to set you in the arrow tool, so you're going to be able to move the copy, put it over the other eye in your sketch, or somewhere else if you feel like your sketch was not exactly how you want it to be. And then you can merge that with your other outlines. Another thing we're missing is the hand here. Oops, I'm realizing I should have erased that a little bit. Gonna do that real quick. There we go. So a big part of that style, I feel, is to have these Mickey Mouse style gloves, which are also quite a bit easier to draw than just regular hands. At least that's my take on it. So we're going to start by drawing the, I don't even know what that would be called in a glove, but the part over the wrist that is super exaggerated in the Mickey Mouse style. So we're going to draw a curve like this, mimic it a little bit further down, and then just connect. So we were creating this kind of balloon shape here. And then the hand itself, I have a video that I'm going to link that is 3 levels of drawing hands that is going to teach you really everything you need to know to draw hands, whether they're cartoonish or realistic. But here we're going with just a flat hand, so I'm going to give you the tips that I use for that. I like to start with the thumb. So you can see here the thumb would be kind of angled outward a little bit, so that's what I'm going to draw. A slightly outward curve, then bringing it in to create the thumb. And then the other fingers, I'm going to draw just 3, which is again kind of this Mickey Mouse thing, and they're just going to be slightly curved the other way. So this is kind of the direction of the fingers, and then you can just flesh them out like this. It's a bit rough, so I might, refine the outlines themselves. That could have been part of the sketch, I guess, but I got excited to move forward to the outlines. Something a bit like this. Maybe refining this line. Sometimes in the cartoonish or the Mickey Mouse hand style, they add little dots here for the knuckles, so you can add that as well. Now this hand is going to be fairly easy as well because it's wrapped around, so we kind of just see the end of the fingers. It would be this hand right here. So we're just going to draw again the general shape, and then we're going to flesh out the fingers. So we're going to have kind of one here, one here, one here. Oops. And then just making them a bit thicker. I'm making them super pointy. You might want to make them a little bit rounder in your illustration, the end that is. Or not, whatever. Something like this. And I'm going to draw at the top of the hand. And I'm going to have the thumb poke out like this. Similar size, that's not too bad. I might actually make the whole can a little bit bigger, so I'm going to select the can. Now you want to be careful when you do that though, not to stretch the pixels too much, because if I was to go ahead and really make it bigger, I would lose a lot of quality, so we don't want that. Then the other thing I'm missing here is this arm, because I didn't have the hand, but otherwise it's going to be pretty easy to draw it. I'm just going to go ahead, have the forearm, and then the top of the arm like this, and I'm going to erase this weird overlap with the can. Great. Okay, so at this stage we're going to go ahead and we're going to hide our sketch to make sure we have most of the elements outlined. I'm just missing the design, but that's intentional. And so when we have everything outlined, we're going to come back and we're going to refine those outlines to make sure they are super great. So what I mean by that is right now we have a bunch of different thicknesses, which is one good thing. We want that. We want some variety, at least I like it personally, some dynamism in the outlines. But we're going to be a little bit more intentional with it. So two things. We're going to make sure the outlines that are on the outside of an important element, so kind of the edges of an element, are thicker, and the outlines that are just decorations, so like for example the little folds in this straw, are thinner. So that could mean, for example, I feel like this outline here and this one here, they're quite thin. So they're the end of an element. I want to make sure that an element is really crisp and easy to see. So I'm just going to go over and thicken my outline. Now obviously this is something you would do to the entire piece, but I'm going to give you tip number 2 before just doing it everywhere so that I can speed up my video once more. Tip number 2 is such a little detail. You think that it doesn't make a difference, but it really does once it's applied to everything. When you have outlines that connect with each other, kind of intersect with each other, the line that is abutting in the other one, thicken the top of it, like this. It is quite strange. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but it really helps make those outline way more legible. Especially if you're working with something that is going to be small, that tip can really help crisp up the whole piece and make it more visually appealing overall. So once more, I'm going to speed up my video to just reassess my outlines based on the 2 tips I just gave you. Feel free to pause the video here or just keep refining along with me. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw the lines for my design. I'm going to make them all thinner so they don't compete with the shape itself, and I'm going to draw them for now on a separate layer because there's going to be a lot of overlaps. So just a new layer, I'm going to rename those, I guess, design outlines. Now, I'm actually not sure I want to have the soda text outlined, so for now I'll leave it as is. Maybe we'll come back later to it, we'll see. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to draw some really nice clean outlines, and when you're ready, we're going to meet in the next chapter of this video, which is going to be adding the colors, and it's going to be super quick and easy, but it's going to completely transform the piece. Great, so now that we have the outlines, it's going to be super easy to add the colors, especially if you're working with Procreate. I'm going to show you a great tip that you can use. Now in most of the videos I have on the channel, I already create a palette before coming in the video, but since this video is more of a create your own retro character, I wanted to also show you how I would approach creating the palette. Now if you're following along with me, don't worry, I'm going to add the hex code of the colors I end up choosing in the end somewhere on the screen. And I will also add a free color palette that you can download below, along with my other freebies, which include so many other palettes, some templates, some brushes, just a whole lot of things. So if you want to check those out, they will be linked in the video description below. Again, totally free. But in this case, yeah, I'm going to show you kind of how to pick your colors. Just jumping in real quick here. So as I was filming the video, I came up with one color palette that is the one you're going to see, well, in the video. But looking back the next day, I felt that was maybe not exactly what I wanted that Sodakin to look like. So I went ahead and created an alternative color palette, an alternative version, I guess. And so if you're following along with me and using the hex code I'm going to provide in the video, you're going to have two options. The top one is going to be for version 1 and the bottom one is going to be for version 2. But I really do encourage you to try and customize your colors, so maybe that doesn't even apply to you. Now, one thing that we're going to do if we're working in Procreate is use this technique or tool, I guess, feature, however you want to call it reference, which is going to allow us to use our outlines, kind of like in the coloring book, as bounding boxes for the different colors, but we're still going to be able to put those colors on separate layers. So I'm going to show you an example right here real quick. If you're working in a different software, you're probably going to have to put your colors within your outlines or manually draw them, not a big deal. But usually when you try to fill in some sections with colors, you would just go and pick whatever color and drop it onto your shape and it would fill the shape, sure. But then our colors are stuck with the outlines, which I'm not a fan of that because I like to create my color palette as I go, and that it's just easier to adjust if everything is on separate layers. So fortunately for us, if we're working with Procreate, there's this feature called reference. So if we go ahead and tap on the outlines layer here, it's going to open up the layer menu, and reference is here at the bottom. So we're going to select that and activate that. Now one thing though, make sure you only have reference on one layer, otherwise it's going to just completely mess up the app. And then what we can do is create layers underneath, and it's still going to consider the outlines as the bounding boxes for the different colors. So what I like to do when I need to create a color palette is first pick the colors that I know need to be certain colors. So for example, I'm going to clear that. I know I want the top of the can to be gray because that's aluminum. So I'm just going to pick a light gray here and drop that on my section. Now if we tap, I lost it, I'll redo it again in a second, but if we tap on the continue filling, it's going to allow us to not drag and drop every time. So continue filling, and then you can just select the different shapes that need to be that one color you have. So we're going to do this with all our different colors to start with, making sure they are all on different layers. And for now, we're going to pick super rough colors. So we mostly want to just have different sections outlined or filled in on different layers, and then we're actually going to build the color palette. So right now I have the top and the bottom of the can. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer for, let's go with the arms and the legs. I want those to be pretty dark in my case. So I'm going to drop my color onto that and then call it a day. Now, it doesn't really apply for this video because we are working with outlines brush that are really no texture at all and just super clean and crisp. But if you're working with a brush that has some texture or some opacity changes within the brush for your outlines, when you fill in the shape, you're going to probably need to adjust what is called the threshold. And you can do that by just holding your pencil on the screen and moving it towards the right or towards the left. It's really not making a difference here because again, my brushes or my outlines were drawn with a brush that is super crisp. But if for some reason when you're dropping your color it's filling in too big of a shape or too small, you could try to adjust the threshold. And your goal would be to put it right where, find a moment right before it fills in too big of a shape. So again, it doesn't apply here, so I'm not going to spend more time just rambling about this. I'm just going to keep filling my shapes. I forgot here, that little pop tab should be gray as well, so I'm going to add it here. Now, one thing that can be helpful too when we're creating a color palette is setting the background to neutral gray, or to a color if you know you want it to be a color. In my case, I'm just going to set it to neutral gray because I know I want this straw to be white, and if my background is white, I'm not going to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick white here. Although I might put it a little bit of a dirty white, so it's not pure white, just so I can add highlights later. You know that's my favorite thing. Never using pure black or pure white so that I can add shadows or highlights everywhere. And maybe I'll bring that same color in the eyes here, just as a way to make everything coherent. That small straw too. Those gloves. Oops. Boing. There we go. And then essentially all I have at this point is the can, and so this was easy. Now it's weird, it's getting a little bit more challenging because it's picking actual colors. So I think I'm going to start for now with just this dusty red. Put that there. And oh gosh, I really don't know, maybe a darker red. Again, at this stage, really don't agonize. Did I create a new layer? I did not. Wow, drawing on my gray. Oops. Yeah, don't agonize with your colors. Just fill in the shapes really quickly that you know are going to be, or you think are going to be of a similar color, and then we're going to play with everything till we actually fit, or to actually find a color palette that we like. I'm actually quite happy with this. I might go back on this layer with the lighter red and use that on my little bubbles here too. I still have this little can here. I might make it even brighter just so it kind of pops. Oops. And then I forgot there would be in the hole of that pop tag, or that pop tag actually should be gray. Where's my gray? Oh, right here. Oh my gosh, I'm getting blind. It's time for this video to be over. Not that I'm not enjoying it, I really am, but oof. Okay. So once you have all your big shapes filled in like this, it's really easy to go back and play with the different colors. So I'm going to do an example with the outlines because right now they're just too light compared to my darker sections, but you could use that example on every different section you have. So you can just pick whatever layer you're not happy with and use what are called adjustment layers. If you're working, for example, in Photoshop, it's literally a layer that you add on top of everything. In Procreate, it's just going to adjust the layer you're working on, so it's not going to create a layer on top, although that would be pretty handy sometimes. But in Procreate, they are here in this magic wand menu here. I like to use this one at the very top called Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, but anything that allows you to play with colors could work. So color balance, curves, really anything here can work. Feel free to see what you like to work with the most. But again, I like Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, so that's what I'm going to work with. It brings a few sliders here at the bottom. Hue is what we call usually the colors, so it's your greens, your yellow, is it orange, is it blue, is it red, what color is it? The saturation is how alive the color looks, so is it kind of dead, muted, and gray, or is it super vibrant and saturated? And then the brightness is it dark, is it light? So with those simple parameters, you can really completely change your color palette more intuitively than having to have one from the start. So I said I didn't like my outlines because they were a little bit too, well, you just can't see them now that I have dark colors. So I'm just going to lower the brightness to bring them back a little bit more. And then I'm going to play with the actual colors. I think I like the darker red, but I think the more pale one is not my favorite. So hue, saturation, brightness. Maybe if I make it brighter, more saturated. I could experiment with different colors too. Well, that's kind of cool. Well, I'm going with retro, so I'm going to keep a pretty limited color palette, but there means that just there's so many different options here. I'm going to keep it within the kind of red and pinks, but yes, this is how you could really experiment and build a color palette that you're happy with. You just start by filling in everything once you have your outlines, I should say. And then you just tweak the settings until you're happy with the colors, and that's pretty much it. Now, one thing we could experiment with here is also slightly colored outlines. Now, because they are gray, I'm not going to be able to add a color to them. The saturation is already desaturated. That makes no sense. The saturation is fully desaturated. So one kind of trick you can do, because they're on a separate layer, is just color drop a new color onto them. So I'm going to pick my dark red here, make it quite a bit darker and more gray as well, but still with a little bit of red. I'm going to go back on my outlines layer, and I'm going to drop that onto one outline. Make sure my threshold is 100% so it fills everything, and see if I like that better. I think I do with the eyes and everything that is connected to the can, but now these gray shapes look weird, so I might do the same thing here. I might add a little bit of red to my gray. So maybe something kind of like this. There we go. I think that's something I prefer. Although now I feel like my outlines might be a little bit too saturated. So now that they have a color to them, we're going to be able to just play with the sliders. If you have something that is pure white, pure black, pure gray, you cannot add color to it with just the sliders. So that's why I had to color drop. So feel free to pause the video here, play with the different colors you have until you're happy with the color palette, and then we're going to come back and really bring the illustration to life by adding some super simple shadows and lights that are completely going to transform the piece. Great, so at this stage we're almost done. We just need to add a few shadows, which are really going to bring everything to life, and maybe a few highlights as well. And at this stage, one thing you might do when you're happy with your colors is just merge everything, so your file is a bit more organized, or at least merge all the colors. I'm just noticing here I added the word soda, but it's kind of overlapping with the lips, so I'm going to erase it here real quick. There you go. And the way to merge layers in Procreate is super easy. You just take two fingers and squish the layers together. And then from there you can just rename the layer to colors. That's really quite satisfying. Now once we have that, we are going to add some shadows. So go ahead and create a new layer above your colors but below your outlines, and rename that new layer to shadows. Now you could go ahead and color pick all the different colors you have, make them darker, and then draw on the different sections that way. Or you could be more efficient and use what is called a blending mode. So blending modes are in the same spot as the opacity slider. So tap on the little N here next to the check mark, yes, on your shadow layer. And scroll to the very top of this list to pick multiply. We're also going to lower the opacity for now around 50%, but we're going to get back to it later as well and tweak that once we actually have some shadows. And without getting into too much detail about blending modes, I do have a whole video about them if you want to learn more specifics about how they work. But a blending mode is going to allow you to use one color. I'm just going to go here and quickly pick. I'm going to pick a better one later. But use just one color and apply that, and it's going to change based on the color underneath. So that's going to be super, super helpful. You're going to be able to add your shadows really quickly that way. Now I actually end up liking this color, so I might just tweak it a little bit here before I forget that it exists. You can really pick whatever color you want when you're using a blending mode like multiply for your shadows. I would avoid though anything that is pure neutral gray or black, because your shadows are going to come out kind of muddy. I usually go with a grayish purple, grayish red, grayish blue, something in that realm. Now if you're working with Procreate, one thing we can do, or in a different software as well, it's a feature that is in a lot of software, so you should be able to find it in yours too. But one thing we can do to make this whole process quicker is use what is called a clipping mask. And so in Procreate, the way to activate a clipping mask is just tapping on your layer to open the layer menu and picking clipping mask right here. And all a clipping mask does is now whatever you draw on the shadow layer is going to stay within your colors. So if I go and quickly draw, you can see it stays within the shape. And so it's just so much quicker to add shadows that way because you don't have to worry about staying within the shapes. If you don't know where clipping masks are in your software, if they're not available, don't worry. You just have to be a little bit more careful at this stage, again, to stay within the shapes. Now you could stick with the same brush you've been using, or you can move to a more standard, just basic round shape. Again, as long as you don't have textures or feathering on the edges, it should work perfectly. So if you're working with free brushes that come with Procreate, you could pick the hard brush. So yes, the hard brush in the airbrushing pack, free brush that comes with Procreate. If you're working with my inking, stippling, and texture bundle though, we are going to pick the base round brush. There we go. So it's a bonus brush that comes with that pack. And here we're going to decide where we want our shadows. We're going to keep them very simple, but we want to make sure they're coherent between each other. So in my case, I'm going to put my pretend light, I guess, my light source here on the top right, which means all my shadows are going to be on the bottom left section of my illustration. So that's exactly what I'm going to draw. I'm going to start with a can just to kind of see what I'm doing well. And I'm going to follow the shape of this outside edge. So I'm going to have this little lip here. I might actually bring in the opacity a little bit higher so you can see well what I'm doing. I'm going to have this little lip, same kind of shape when the can narrows. But then otherwise it's going to be pretty straight. So something like this. I'm going to have the bottom lip covered too. And then I can just fill it in really quickly. Now this is too dark for my liking, but again, I want to make sure you can see it super well in the video, so I'm going to keep it dark for now. And I'm going to make it a little bit less opaque later. So already with just that, there's so much more volume and interest to the piece. Now we're going to add shadows on the legs as well. So the legs are under the can. What I like to do in that case is have this kind of curve here and shade that whole section. So it's kind of like the can is casting a shadow on the legs. And if it wasn't a can, like if you're drawing something else, or if I was drawing something else, at least that's what I would do, I would still use that same little curvy technique, no matter what the thing on top is. Essentially, I would do that on the legs. Now the arms are quite thin, but we're still going to add a little bit of shadow, especially where it's not overlapping with the shadow of the body, just to give a bit more volume to the arm and make them more interesting. So same thing as we did on the can here, but just more narrow and smaller. So following the shape of the arm, focusing on the bottom left side. Now, if I'm completely honest with you, I am not feeling great right now. I need to lay down, I think, so I'm a bit shaky. I'm sorry about that. But we're going to push on and keep going because we're so close to the end, and when we add those highlights, oh my gosh, you're going to see it's going to really pop. Now I got carried away and I did something without telling you, but essentially it's the same as the arm but on this wrist part of the glove, and we might do a little bit on the glove itself too. Might make it a little bit smaller, my brush that is. Not that there's a specific size that is required here, as long as you're able to be detailed enough, that's all that you're looking for. And then add the same kind of curvy shadows on the fingers. Doing the same on the other hand as well. We don't want to go into too many details with those shadows, because in my mind this illustration is meant to be pretty small, kind of like a sticker. And so if you add too many details, when you zoom out, you don't see them anyway, so it's not worth it. Adding a shadow on this arm too. Same thing, this kind of little curve on the bottom left. And we're going to add one behind the can, just going to help that small can pop from the big can. And now the big can is not right, like in my mind they're not touching it, there's a little bit of space, so we're going to essentially redraw that little can with just a shadow on the big can and a little bit further down towards the bottom left. So right now we have this can, and it's not quite right, because in theory, you know, the straw touches the mouth. So we're going to draw the straw real quick here. Again, it should mimic roughly what this can is, although I made mine a little bit smaller, so I'll make that bigger. But once you have roughly the shape, you can go ahead and select it. And using your arrow tool, first I'm going to set my arrow tool to uniform so I can make it a better match in terms of the size. It's a pretty good shape otherwise. But then we're going to rotate it a little bit. And we want to bring the straw closer to the mouth. So we're going to use distort. And using the blue anchor points here, we're going to move our shadow until that straw is kind of in the mouth. Which, again, it's not a tried and true method to do it, but it's a good trick to have if you're not sure where to put your cast shadows. You can kind of draw it next to the side and then move them around until it feels right. Now I'm going to erase any weird overlap that shouldn't be there. I'm going to actually move the straw, that section here, a bit lower because in theory the mouth is poking out. So it should be kind of like this. And then I'm going to erase, of course, any overlap that I have because this can is not creating a shadow on itself, only on the big can underneath. So something like that. And then we're going to use the same technique as we used for the can for the straw. So focusing on the left and the bottom. Probably filling in that opening here because it would not be getting any light. And then I'm going to add this whole section here that is kind of lower in the top of the can. I'm going to shade that whole thing. Great. Now we can also add a shadow under the can. So you might want to go ahead, well, you kind of have to go ahead and create a new layer under the can because otherwise we have our clipping mask here. And so go ahead and create that new layer under everything you have and rename it to ground shadow. We're going to use the same blending mode, so multiply. And we're going to use the same color, which is going to draw a little, kind of an oval. Yeah, something like that. I reactivated my sketch. That was not intentional. And then once we have all the shadows everywhere, it's easier to decide how dark we want them to be. I actually kind of like mine right now on the can, so I might leave them. But I'm definitely going to make the ground shadow not as dark as 100%. I might distort it a little bit too. Yeah, something like that. And last but not least, we're going to add some highlights, which is a very similar technique to the shadows. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything except for the outlines. Rename that new layer to highlights. If you want, and if it's available to you, you can also apply it as a clipping mask, just so it's a bit easier and quicker. And just like we did here, we're going to use a blending mode again so that you don't have to individually make every color lighter. Now you could use add, you could use overlay, soft light, really whatever you want. I might try to go with overlay this time. In most of my videos I go with add, but I feel like for this style of retro sticker cartoons, overlay might look a little bit better. We also want to avoid a really neutral color for the highlights. So in my case, I usually just go with this bright yellow orangey color, but you could tweak your shadows and highlight color the same way you tweak the colors of the actual illustration. So just start by drawing them and you can always go back and use an adjustment layer later. Now, as we can remember, I put my light source, in my mind at least, on the top right. So this means my lights are going to be on the top right section of my shapes. So that's exactly where I'm going to place them. Again, exact same technique as the shadows, but the opposite side and with a different color. I do want to keep my highlights a little bit less intense than my shadows, meaning I'm going to keep them smaller. I'm going to mostly use them to separate elements that are kind of blending into each other too much. So it's going to be pretty thin highlights. almost like they were outlines. Now I do feel like this might be a little bit too intense, so maybe I'm going to lower the opacity or experiment with different blending modes altogether. I guess soft light could be really nice. Yeah, I quite like soft light. I'll go with that for now and maybe play with it more. Now one thing you could do if you have a shiny element like the soda can is add some extra highlights. So just these little dots and lines that show that it's shiny and kind of glistening. I feel like now it's not bright enough. I need something between overlay and soft light. I guess it's going to be overlay, but low opacity. So I'm going to stop talking here to let you focus on placing your highlights, but I'm going to keep my video going in the background, of course, so you can use it as a reference and see what I'm doing. And now the last thing we might want to do here to make it pop a little bit is come back and erase the very edge of our shadows. It's a very small detail seemingly, but it really helps separate the piece from the background. Or separate the character, I guess, from the background. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I would love to see what kind of retro character you created. So make sure to share your illustration with me on Instagram and tag me at Genevieve Design Studio. If you want to learn to draw more cartoon characters similar to this one, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more videos for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But once that is done, click on the link right here, and I'll see you in this next video.